So this month we're focused on D3M from pre-sales to post-sales. So we'll just run through what might be a typical situation where you get started on a project and each stage throughout that project all the way to the end when you've deployed a network and you are then possibly providing support to that customer months later or something like that. So we'll just quickly go through what we think that might look like. And again, feel free to ask questions at any point here. I'll just move on to my next screen here. This is especially important this month, remembering what D3M stands for. It stands for Design, Document, Deliver, and Manage. And that's exactly what we're going to do here, is go through the design phase and then the document phase, the deliver phase, and the manage phase, that post-sales management of your deployments. Again, Chris Mulcahy, my information is on your screen there now, where you can contact me by email or by phone, and Amanda Fogut is here and her information is there for you as well. And we will share those details again at the end. So I'm just going to jump right into the app here. 1 second. And what you should be seeing now is the website, the D3M website. As always, when you want to get started on a D3M project, you go to d3mnetworks.com, and that's where you get started. You click on the login here. And if you happen to be just getting started, if you don't have an account yet, there is that free 14-day free trial option. That's where you would quickly sign up. But otherwise, I enter my email address and my password here, and I sign in. So once I'm signed in, we'll focus now on, let's imagine that our salesperson at our company is first talking to a new prospect or possibly an existing customer, but either way, we're talking about a new project here. We want to just quickly walk through the stages of what that process might look like. So when it typically starts with a call that your sales rep is having with the prospect or with the customer, and during that call, they're initially gathering some information on this new project, right? So when you jump into D3M here, you've signed in. Every time you enter D3M, you land here on the projects page. On the projects page, there's a big orange button here to start a new project. So that's typically what you would do. You'd click on the new project button, and first thing, they're actually, I've pointed this out before, but just so you know, there really are only 2 required fields here to get started. But let's say we're doing this for the Four Seasons Hotel, and we happen to be working on a radio network for them. Okay, really those 2 fields, the customer name and the project name, are the only 2 fields required here. Then you have the other information that you can plug in here as well, and maybe you're gathering this on that initial call. So it's fair to say that this is the pre-sales stage of this project right now. Our physical address where we are currently working, we'll go with our Ottawa, Canada address here. And then assuming this is probably going to be a Motorola network, I would go with the network mode of IP Site Connect. Now, again, this information, you don't have to plug this in right now. You can always come back to it later, and I'll quickly show you how to do that. But yeah, plug in whatever you can right now. Let's say this will be in Vancouver on the West Coast here. That's where we'll be deploying this network potentially. And the deployment date, again, you can define it now or later, but let's say by the end of the year here. Okay, so that's how I quickly get started on a project. Now, once I go into the project, I can easily change, like I was saying there, I can change those settings at any time by going to the top right here. There's a gear icon. I click on that, and that's where any of this stuff, including the customer name, the project name, any of that can be edited. So I can change that at any time. Now, so we're gathering a bit of information here on the customer. We're getting started. We've created a project for this project that we're looking at working on with the customer. And then naturally, you want to start thinking about putting a quick diagram together, a quick quote to share with the customer. So how you would start doing that is possibly by dragging and dropping some icons out to your canvas here on the topology diagram page. Or, and by the way, just a reminder, that's the first thing you see when entering a D3M project. But then there's the next section is the rack diagram, which is an option too. You can get started in either of those. But for now, I'll just drag out a couple repeaters that I think from the conversation, that I'm having right now with the customer, we think that they'll probably need a couple of these repeaters here, and they're going to need some radios. So I'll drag out a radio here. All right. So we've started by doing that. Now, of course, just a reminder again that you can double click any of these icons to make any adjustments to the, sorry, I just need to move a couple things off my screen. Make any adjustments to the properties, perhaps the quantity, for example. This radio is likely not going to be just one radio. So I double click it, and if I want that to be a group of 50 radios or 100 radios, I simply set that, and now I have 100 radios and 2 repeaters. Okay, so we're on our way. That is, we're putting a rough diagram together. I can jump ahead to, say, the quote here. See that a quote has been automatically assembled. I see 2 repeaters and 100 radios showing there. That, by the way, if I just jump back to my diagram, is visible from the diagram as well. If I click on the quote view here, it's highlighted in green. Any device on this diagram that is highlighted in green, that indicates that there are pricing, there are quote parts included on those devices. By the way, just a side note, if you are at a stage using D3M where maybe you haven't imported your pricing to D3M yet, just a quick reminder here that we have bottom right corner, a chat bubble, where you can start a conversation with our tech support team if you have any questions about doing anything at all really in D3M, but something specific to uploading your pricing perhaps. Start a conversation with us here. You also have access to our help articles here. So if I were to, maybe I want to import my Motorola pricing, I can write Motorola here, and I would see some help articles showing up there. If I were to search the word pricing or anything like that, I would see these same help articles pop up there. So assuming that, by the way, it only takes a few minutes to import your pricing, and that can be tens of thousands of quote parts perhaps. So assuming you've done that, I can quickly see here that I have price parts, quote parts associated with these icons here, and if I double click on any of them, I can just scroll below the properties here, and I can see that quote part here. I see a repeater, for example, valued at $3,000. Okay, and by the way, I can edit that. I can delete that part. I can look for another one. Okay, I'll put, I think that ended up being the same one, but I'll put that one on there. I can add multiple quote parts to any device. I can add quote parts to connections as well. And by the way, I might as well just quickly make a connection here as a reminder to how that works. If I look here at the top right corner, again, the view options, I click on ports, and that's where I can connect. I'll just turn the quote view off. Connect this radio port to this slot on this repeater, and that connection or any other connection can be quoted as well. I can double click on a connection. I can add a quote part. I can put a certain number of feet of cable perhaps. Maybe I have a price per foot on a cable. I can, if I had 100 feet of that cable, I can do that there. Let's, for example, say that this was a cable, and I know this isn't going to make total sense. I'll just remind you that I'm not an engineer, but there are, let's say 100 of this price per foot. Again, just a quick view at how D3M keeps everything in sync. If I jump back to that quote, I see here's that coax cable, 100 feet of it at $2.14 per foot. So that's $214. Anyway, so the idea there being that this is the pre-sales stage of the project, and I'm quickly assembling a diagram. I'm quickly, well, D3M is automatically assembling a quote from that diagram, and basically you're starting to think about possibly presenting this to the customer. So I also want to point out at this stage, as you're kind of setting up the project, that you might want to jump ahead to the file section as well. So the file section in D3M is where you can keep any documents, any files, anything related to this project that other people working with you on this project should have access to. So for example, you might keep a spec sheet here, you might keep code plug files here, anything. It might be images, it might be a floor plan, anything like that. So you can keep here. And I just mentioned working with people, so working with your colleagues on this project. You should also remember that the collaborate button is right here. And as soon as you think it makes sense, again, we were saying that the sales, your sales rep started this project. Maybe, you know, they're starting to think it would make sense for their somebody on the engineering team, somebody a technical to jump on this project and have a look at what they're building out. They click that collaborate button, and this is where you invite your colleagues to join you on this project. So just keep that in mind. So we very easily got started here by starting a project, dragging and dropping some devices out to the diagram here, perhaps making some connections, basically doing whatever is needed here, and that then automatically generates a quote. You probably want to turn around and actually share a document now with your customer, with the prospect. And the way to do that is quite simple. If you just jump ahead here to the Documents section in D3M, click on Create a New Document. And you probably want to work with either one of the templates that we here at D3M give you there to work with, or a template that your organization has created. So for example, I tend to use my sales proposal template here. I'll go ahead and create a document. And really just a couple clicks of a button and I have a document that's ready to go, right? That diagram is automatically showing here. That quote that was automatically created is showing here. So this document is ready to go. You have basically two ways of sharing this document with your customer. You can click the Export/Share button near the top right there. I can download a PDF of this and email it to the customer. Or I can copy this share link, and this is really something that we encourage people, D3M users, to put to use, is this link will show your prospect or customer an always up-to-date version of the document. So this will come especially because next thing we'll talk about here really is how you're going to send this document, and then the customer, you know, you might negotiate certain details. There will probably be a little bit of back and forth, and instead of sending them version 1 and version 2 and version 3 of the PDF, it might be better to just send them this share link that will always be up to date, like I was saying there. So basically, you share the document with your customer, and then from there, like I say, it might go back and forth a few times, but eventually, let's assume that this deal moves forward, and you move on from the pre-sales stage of this project to a later stage. So we could always, I'll just remind you here, that gear icon, you can always change the status of your project from pre-sales to staging to deployment. So let's say we just moved on here to staging. I'll just save that. So this project has now moved forward. What you're probably doing at that point, you go back to your topology. You might be making alterations, changes to the layout of this, changes to the number of devices, the connections, and so on, the configuration. I want to say just a couple more words here about diagramming while we're looking at it. Remember that there are things that can speed this process along, the diagramming phase of the project. You have bundles that we offer in D3M, and that means that anything you've ever created in D3M, you can select it, right-click, and save the bundle. So save this whole configuration, that this group of devices and the connections. Save that to your library, and then later you could do this. Just drag and drop an entire configuration, right? And by the way, you can save that with pricing on it. So if I were to look at the quote here, quote, I see that all of this has pricing except for this switch. So in this scenario, let's assume that the switch doesn't need to be quoted. Maybe that's a customer-owned portion of the network there. So this is your quick view at, okay, it looks like everything has been quoted correctly. Again, I can jump to the quote and see that, again, everything is automatically in sync in D3M. All that stuff I just dragged out is showing there. And as I was saying, we have gotten past now the design phase of the project. Remember, D3M stands for design, document, deliver, and manage. So now we're talking more about documenting and getting closer to delivering the project. We sent the customer a document, that PDF or that share link to the D3M document. And at this point, you would probably, you're just double checking the technical details and making sure that everything is properly documented before you move on to delivering this solution. So the quote and the diagram here, you can possibly at this point move on to the rack diagram. Maybe you want to start planning that part of it. So if I were to click here, add rack to this rack diagram, and my sync tool is showing me that all these devices are included in my network topology, in my network design. So these devices need to be accounted for here in the rack diagram. So very simple, I just drag and drop some things out here. And remember that if any of these devices don't really make sense in your rack, these are not devices that would be racked, then you can just go ahead and ignore them here in D3M. So select this radio, for example. At the bottom, it says ignore icon. You can ignore that there. Select another one, ignore icon. And so they're just being accounted for here. And this sync tool here in the icons library is then satisfied if you go ahead and ignore everything that should be ignored, and everything that should be added to the rack has been added to the rack. Now the D3M sync tool is letting you know, okay, great, your diagrams are in sync. So that's perfect. And again, changes can be made to any of this at any point, whenever necessary, right? From the rack diagram here, I can double click. I can make edits to the properties there. From the topology, I can double click. I can make edits to anything that I need to edit there. And here's another view of the same data. If I go to the inventory view, that's where the same data, that group of 100 radios that I created earlier, that's here in a tabular format. So this is where you probably want to do things like maybe there's a firmware version. I think 2.9 might make sense. So that firmware version, perhaps that would make sense. And if I double click this bottom right square when highlighting the selection, that will send that same value all the way down the list on 100 devices there. I can create sequences. So anything that is a unique value on these 100 radios, it would make sense to edit that sort of thing here in the inventory view. So if the radio ID on that will be 101, 102, and so on, I can highlight them, double click that, and now instead of the same value going the whole way down the list, you're looking at a sequence from 101 all the way to the bottom of the list there. So that's the way you can make edits to that sort of thing. And again, we're moving on from designing this to documenting it and getting closer to delivering on the project, right? And like I say, these are the types of details. You probably want to import the serial number. When I say import, you can copy and paste from a spreadsheet, an Excel sheet, or a Google sheet. You can use a scan gun to scan values in, that serial number, and so on. So whatever you need to do to import that data into your D3M project here. So I've been talking for a little while there. I'll just check in on the questions. Any questions?
Nothing has come through yet.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Amanda.
You're making sense.
So I'm hoping everyone is understanding what I've said so far. But yeah, so I mean, this is, like I say, just a quick recap. We're talking about going from pre-sales all the way to delivering and managing a project post-sales. So we're just about at that point where we can assume that on this project that we're demoing here, that it's been diagrammed, it's been quoted, a document was sent to the customer, and the data here specific to these, remember that here in the inventory view, you're not only looking at the devices, but you're looking at the connections themselves too. So all this data, let's assume that it now makes sense, and that this is ready for deployment. So you're ready to deliver. You've done your rack diagram as well, like we looked at there. So what you would do is your technician, your engineer, whoever is going out to the field there with the customer, they are now equipped with this. They have the information they need in the D3M document. Again, you used the collaborate button there to include your technician on this project. So now they can refer to this when they go ahead and deploy this network. So when they're racking it, when they're making the connections needed in the network. So that's that. Of course, we're assuming that the customer has signed off on the project at this point, and again, they were able to easily see your proposal document and any other documents, by the way, that you wanted to share with them. They were easily able to see an up-to-date version of it, either because you sent a PDF here from D3M, or you sent them that share link that's always up to date. So then really that brings us to the stage where it's been delivered, it's been deployed, and now the M in D3M stands for management. And that's post-sales support of these deployments, of these networks that you've delivered to customers. And that brings us back to the projects page where we first started. So if I were to go to the drop-down menu here, and I see all projects as the first option there, or if I just go ahead and click the D3M logo here, either way, it'll bring me back to the projects page. And what you see there is every project you've ever deployed. So in our case, we have at least hundreds, maybe thousands listed here. These can easily be searched. You can filter through them. So there are filtering options. You can filter, by the way, we've been talking about the status of a project here. So pre-sales or staging or deployment or post-sales support. You can filter by that. So you can find projects that are all in the same stage. You can filter by the office that you're working from, for those of you that have multiple locations. And then you can just search. So I said Four Seasons Hotel, for example. And you can see that I've done a few of those, and there they are. I can easily click the one I'm looking for. I have some options here where I can duplicate a project, by the way. If you're ever working on a new project that is very similar to a previous project you worked on, using these options here, there's a duplicate option. That'll come in handy then to save yourself having to build the project again when it's very similar to something you previously configured. So all your options are there, easy to find the projects that you've worked on. By the way, just one other thing I'll say while we're on this projects page here that you start on every time you enter D3M. We're just offering you some things here, like a quick link to the help center that I mentioned before that you can get to from the chat bubble in the bottom right corner here. So that help center's there. We're giving you some things like here's a case study we did recently with a customer, just to kind of get more familiar with how other people are using D3M. So all the information you need is there. And no matter where you are in D3M, there's always this drop-down menu in the top right corner where you can get to your account settings and things like that. So just keep that in mind. We have some tutorial screens included there as well. So that's my quick explanation of a D3M project, or really any network project, a network solution project that you are managing using D3M from pre-sales to post-sales. That includes the design phase, the document, deliver, and manage phases of a project. I hope that kind of helps explain, how things work from phase to phase.